this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the Plaquemines Parish Council as the sole governing authority of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District for June the 9th to order at 3 p.m. Machine is open for roll call.
Mr. Bartholomew, can you?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect that all members are present except Councilman Black and Dr. Gouy is here now. Also, Mr. Sanders is representing the port. At this time, we'd like to ask you to rise for the prayer, and then we'll be led in the pledge by Mr. Blink. Let us pray. We take this moment to acknowledge Almighty God and thank Him for our bountiful blessings, especially for the parish's natural resources. We pray for all of those who have lost their lives from COVID-19. We pray that the number of COVID cases does not reach pandemic numbers again, and the world moves forward to a healthy and brighter future. We pray that entering this hurricane season, everyone will get prepared and the season will be a peaceful one. We also pray that we will be spared from all harm and destruction. We pray for the people of Ukraine and that you provide a path to peace and stop the senseless killings. We pray that this government body comprised of both council and administration will always serve our parish with honesty, humility, and equality to all, and for the wisdom to know right from wrong and the courage to do that which is right. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for attending. We'll move on to the next item.
Executive session, there are none. Status report by the Executive Port Director, Sandy Menard.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Vice Chairman. I am Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemines Port. Follows is my Executive Director's report for the reporting period of 27 May to 8 June. During this time frame, Matthew Martinek with CSRS Engineering, Marion Edwards, Councilman with Jefferson Parish, Chris Fetters, and I reviewed the mega grant application for the West Bank Rail bypass that was submitted on 23 May. We pledged to continue to work together as everyone understood the fate of the grant and future funding mechanisms depends on the success of the container port. To quote Councilman Edwards, PPHTD's success is our success. We will continue to collaborate to expand the Plaquemines First initiative to include Jefferson Parish. We have initiated a series of meetings with Mott McDonald in connection to integrating commercial air cargo onto the Naval Air Station Belle Chase, as they have done with a similar group at the Brookley Air Base in Mobile, Alabama. The Brookley Air Base is a former U.S. Air Force base that was BRAC'd and has slowly been commercialized since closing in the mid-'60s. Recently, a board member was invited to be on the radio talk show to speak about Venture Global Project. Invariably, many of our commissioners will be invited to speak at events such as the Rotary, PABI, West Bank Business and Industry Association, etc., to include radio and TV. I invite any and all of you to call the port staff and let us assist you in your talking points, so we can assure that you have the latest data at your command. The following are some of the facts that should be of interest to all, but were not stated in the interview. On a full build-out basis, the Venture Global Terminal will experience 200 to 300 ships per year, which equates to 4 to 6 ships per week. Presently, there are 600 workers on site, which will climb to 4,000 to 5,000 at full construction. After construction, the employ could result in 200 to 400 permanent jobs. Just as there were facts that were omitted that should have been said, there were things that were said that should have been omitted. It was stated on the radio show that the PPHTD container project conflicted with the Port of New Orleans as far as competition goes. Furthermore, a lack of a coordinated, comprehensive plan to provide a realization as to where we are in where to put efforts and resources is lacking. Lastly, there is already infrastructure in place, and what we are doing is recreating the wheel, questioning, is this a good decision? Whereas the proposed infrastructure we are pursuing is specifically outlined in the port's master plan. Please allow me to clearly state what I have repeatedly told the governor, the Louisiana delegation in Washington, D.C., and any and all state reps who invariably inquire about our relationship with the Port of New Orleans. There are three major distinctions that separate the Plaquemines Port Container Terminal project from the proposed new Port of New Orleans project in Violet. First of all, cargo. Plaquemines Port, known as the Louisiana Gateway Terminal, is focused on bringing new cargo to the region. We have secured an anchor beneficial cargo owner with sufficient demands to commercialize and construct Phase 1 of our terminal. The beneficial cargo owner forecast for growth will drive the Louisiana Gate Terminal above 800,000 TEUs per year in the near term. The design of the overall terminal is set to attract the next generation of vessels, i.e. greater than 12,000 TEU capacity, that are currently not serving the Port of New Orleans. The second one is the site setting. The Louisiana Gateway Terminal its location is positioned in an expansive area which will reach into the target market of the Midwest. This is supported by multiple evaluations over the past 20 years that focus on the Mississippi River and the robust rail network, both avoiding congestion around the city, again identified in the plan. Yes, the Louisiana Gateway Terminal requires infrastructure upgrades, but so do all new terminals and ports. And lastly, the distinction is our funding. The Louisiana Gate Terminal development has been backed by private funding. PPHTD has repeatedly not pursued funds from the state of Louisiana to avoid this perception of competition. The ports in Louisiana need a new way to grow and set the mark for growth. This requires a first-to-market mentality that public funds do not regularly allow. We are following the plan that has been reviewed, updated, and acknowledged by several experts, both domestic and international, and we are moving forward at a pace that is not in competition with any local project, as seen in the agreements with our beneficial cargo owner, the operator, and now the EPC. There is something, however, to be said about the idea of the state implementing a comprehensive strategic master plan to ensure the state maximizes its global maritime presence. I am all for that, as there are many things that can be done based on a regional outlook. But we already have a strategic master plan that utilizes the state's Millennium Port Plan. It is a plan that was fearlessly initiated by the council leadership in the early 2000s, and I was hired as a result of that plan in 2013. The guidance I received when installed as the executive director was to implement that plan. Let me emphasize, getting permission from another port to move forward in fulfilling that strategic plan of building a much-needed container terminal on the lower Mississippi River is not in my contract. I vow to fulfill the port's vision statement, that being this port will serve as the Gulf Gateway to the heartland of America, and we are well on our way of doing just that. Lastly, in my report, I will be followed by Chris Fetters with LA 23 Development Company, who will provide an update on the terminal project.
Thank you
Ms.
for your
Fetters?
report. Thank you for your report, Mr. Sanders, and let's clear the record up a little bit because I'm the council member that was interviewed, and I'm the one that made the comments in response to questions that were given to me over the radio. And so you or nobody else around here will put a gag in my mouth to express my opinion.
I'm not putting a gag in your mouth.
I have the floor
I am
right-
just correcting the record of what
I
you
have
said.
the floor, and if you don't like it, you can leave. So let me finish my comments.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So you can take that interview and twist it and turn it any way you like. My comments stand and my opinions stand. And Michael Heck and I together answered questions. And you had one valid point in your response just now to picking that interview apart, was that I did not know how many ship calls were coming a week. I apologize for that. I didn't know it was 4 to 6 ships. I had admitted that I didn't know, and I said it was at least 2. However, the rest of the comments that I made are my comments and my opinions. And I don't know where you think you can gag me.
I'm not trying to gag you, but I think as being the chairman, if they were your comments and your opinions, then you should have caveated your remarks as such.
I didn't interview as the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District. I interviewed as Benny Roussel as the chairman of the Port Harbor and Terminal District, and that is what I interviewed as. So don't come to me and try to gag me and say that I should qualify and say anything other than what I said. I don't go around gagging you when you run off and say things that are not accurate or not true. And I don't expect you to try to put a muzzle on me when I voice my opinion. And so, without belaboring the point, you can go out there and do whatever you got to do, but I'm going to tell you, you are not going to gag me, period.
Without belaboring the point, I think the point is made.
I hope it is. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next item.
Chris Fetters.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we've got a number of, this is Chris Fetters with Louisiana 23. We've got a number of presentations today. We'll do our best to keep them as brief, but there's a lot of information with the progress in the terminal as well as the rail that we'd like to go over in the public setting. The 4 presenters, first is Sam Athene. You've spoken to Sam a few times. He was with Volkert and heads up our mainline rail. Second is Luc Labat, who again is with Volkert and is overseeing the terminal development itself. And then he is supported by one of the technical leads, Hardik from WSP, who is going to start to show you some of the positions and evaluations that we're doing with regard to operation of the terminal to show how advanced we are in the design process. And then lastly, Mr. Pedro Santos with Andalusian is here. He is our beneficial cargo owner that we have been working with now for almost 18 months. And Pedro has agreed to come forward and start to discuss what Andalusian's vision is, what their timeline is, and the way that they're approaching the market. Sam?
Apologize for the technical challenge at the moment. This is the update report for the mainline extension for the previous month. And just as a brief review, we're now in the phase 2 of the design process for the mainline extension. That effort is divided into 8 primary tasks as we've presented last month and are listed here. I'll not repeat those as we've communicated that previously. Currently, the approved budget for the phase 2 design is $2.5 million, and that money is broken down on this slide based on the management costs as well as the 8 design, or 8 tasks of the Phase 2 design. I'll not run through those numbers, each number. That's, for information. What I'd like to get into really is what we've accomplished since our last report a month ago. So under task 1 of the design Phase 2 is primarily a data collection task for a lot of our field investigation work. And to date, we've completed approximately 75% of the field surveys for the environmental resources such as wetlands and endangered protected species. We've begun the field work for cultural resources as well. That's not as far advanced. The data collected to date for these studies is starting to be processed to incorporate into the final environmental constraints analysis, which when that is complete, that will then allow us to make the final selection of the route. The supplemental topographic surveys that are fed by the aerial survey, those should begin soon. We're processing the data from the aerial surveys to create our topographic surfaces, and then that will help us identify any data gaps for the supplemental field surveying, such as drainage culverts and just items that didn't look right in the aerial survey. And then for task 3, that's the subsurface utility investigation work. We're currently reviewing the first level of that from the Phase 1 and coming up with the areas that will need further investigation, either to level C or level B. And then we've been working on developing the scope of work for the Sioux subcontractor that will perform those further investigations of the existing utilities. Task 4, which is the route analysis and selecting our preferred corridor. We've conducted field surveys along both routes, to help identify areas that the Phase 1 standard track cross sections will not be able to apply to help refine areas call them choke points, but that'd be spots like along the highway where Kinder Morgan is, where we may have to shrink our cross section to fit through the available right-of-ways that we have. And then in that process, we've put together our second revision of the track alignment drawings for the continued analysis and effort to get to the 30% design deliverable. For task 5, on our permit documents, we've continued conducting planning meetings with our council for the Surface Transportation Board application. We've started drafting those documents for that application and for our first meeting with the STB. As part of that, we've also collected proposals from 3 engineering firms that will perform the third-party STB OEA assessment that is required by the STB. So though we select the firm, they approve the firm, and they manage that firm. And we have scheduled our first meeting with the STB for July 13th. So hopefully we'll have more to report on that at the July board meeting. Regarding geotechnical investigation, we've established our investigation plan, our boring locations. We've performed some site investigation to evaluate where those borings are located, as far as what access we'll need for that, as far as clearing to get the boring equipment to those locations. And we're preparing the geotechnical boring investigation permit application. That application should be submitted to the authorities next week. And then on our right-of-way acquisition, there's not much of an update on this for this month, other than we have been meeting with some of the main commercial property owners, such as Kinder Morgan and others through the area. We have made progress with 4 of the 5 that we need to work with to get easements across their properties, and those discussions are going well. They're certainly not final yet at this point, but they are progressing. And then lastly, task 8 is the 30% rail design. We've not specifically done any additional design tasks on that yet. We have to wait till we finish collecting our field data and make our preferred route selection. And then the 30% design package, the effort on that will kick into to full gear once we make that route selection. And we should make that selection by the end of this month. And then just looking ahead for the next 60 to 90 days for some of our key our key dates here. As I said, the geotechnical investigation permit application should be submitted. I've got tomorrow on here. We're hoping to do that tomorrow, but at the latest that will be next week. Then on the 17th of June, we hope to have our route analysis more or less complete, or complete to the point that we are confident in making our preferred corridor selection. And then by the 22nd, we plan to have the route analysis report completed, because we need that report to take to the STB. And then on 12 July or 13 July, we haven't got the exact time and date set yet, but STB has confirmed that it will be either the 12th or the 13th. We'll make our initial briefing to them and our recommendation for the firm to perform the third-party EA under their direction. And then after that, following that meeting, we get clarifications from the Surface Transportation Board, then we'll complete our final environmental constraints report, and then that will free us up to continue with the design, because we'll know where our corridor is, and then it will also free us up to continue with a lot of the other permit applications. And that's it for my presentation. If anyone has any questions.
Councilmember Blink.
Certainly. There's a tremendous amount of effort and steps that go into this. But what I noticed was absent was anything related to community input. Just not there. In particular, the preferred corridor. At some point, showing progress to the public and getting input from them.
Hold on.
I'll put it.
Yeah, at some point, showing what you have to the public and getting their input on where this rail line that's going to affect them for generations is going to be located is key. I've said it many times before. Once we uncork this genie, the railroad will be able to do whatever they want, put as much traffic as they want through Plaquemines Parish. The coal terminal can start moving coal trains here. We really need to have some public input, and I don't necessarily need to be there. I certainly don't need to find out just 5 days before it's going to happen. But those meetings need to be forthcoming. Yield.
Councilman Bartholomew.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Bartholomew goes, can I
Oh,
just,
we're going to take the board first.
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Blink's.
You're not going to respond until the board, then you can respond.
Okay.
Mr. Bartholomew?
Yes, my concern is that have you had a positive dialogue with the LNG facility that's being constructed, and whether or not the proposed site or proposed sites that you are considering, and have they been directly prepared to deal with those sites and make a recommendation on their behalf? Will it impede the process of development of the LNG facility? I don't see that, because it plays a very integral part in the future of the port itself, the LNG facility. and the construction phase of that thing is awesome. So the point is that I didn't hear anything or hear anything from you that you have an ongoing dialogue, positive dialogue, not a conversation with them about their opinion about the rails, the location of the rail as far as they're concerned.
That's complete your comments, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Any
Mr.
further
Chairman, thank you.
comments from the board? Mr. Fetters?
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Blink, we did have, at the behest of Mr. Sanders, 2 meetings that were originally scheduled for this week, and I understand there may have been some, communication errors as far as advance notice. One was for Monday, one was actually for yesterday. Those have been postponed. I was actually just talking to Commissioner Kognovich. I believe that there's one that is going to be scheduled for the 16th down the river at Mr. Kognovich's discretion of where we go. I think he and Mr. Sanders are going to be working that out location-wise. But we are working to get those community outreach meetings started and begin to convey that information out as quickly as we can. And we know there's going to be a little bit of stumble, but we definitely want to get at least some of these meetings done before we go to surface transportation.
Sure. I mean, stumble and subterfuge are 2 separate things here. And the thing is, I'll get a call about this kind of thing. There's never a paper trail. When I go to email somebody about it, I never get a return. This is really important. This is going to affect people's lives. And it just needs to be done right.
And we agree. But as you could probably imagine, as the private entity, we really can't call a public meeting. We come when we show up or when we're requested to, and we're absolutely willing to do that. So we are standing by, right, to be called and at you guys' behest on your individual districts. And we will be there, okay?
Any further comments?
Yeah, certainly, yeah. And so for other communities outside of Plaquemines, the way not to develop a port is to have a private developer in the middle of your business, because this is the things that happen. Yield.
Do you want to respond?
Any further comments? Hearing none? You have some more comments?
Just to respond to Commissioner Bartholomew's, we have initiated dialogue with Venture Global. We were able to obtain the information we need of their design for their pipe bridge. And I'm glad to say that their design details will allow us to pass under their pipe bridge. We will have the clearances we need. We'll have to do some particular engineering, some particular safety features for their facilities, such as crash walls, which are typical in the rail business. If you get too close to a structure, you build a wall that if a train derails, the wall stops the train, so you don't damage that infrastructure. I wouldn't call it a positive dialogue, but we have the information we need to continue to proceed. We will need still to meet with them to review our design when we get to the 30% design phase, to coordinate those safety studies to ensure that they feel we've adequately protected their pipe bridge.
So they're on board with your with your presentation about the direction you're headed in with the rail when it comes to their facility.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I have they committed to support your direction for the rail when it goes across the plan, or front, behind, over, whatever. LNG plan, their support of agreement. I heard that you had dialogue. See, the dialogue mean different things with different people. Dialogue means you can tell me I presented a question or scenario to you. Well, that's a dialogue. No, I mean a specific dialogue to outline the design and what impact will it have on it. If I don't have any impact, I would specifically say the design that you have presented to me, I don't foresee any reason us having a problem with it. And that kind of discussion, I don't think has taken place yet, right? Oh, it has.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
So, absolutely, yes, sir, it has. We have made several attempts to contact a lot of the technical leads at Venture Global, and obviously with the work they have going on, they're quite busy right now, and all due respect to them. In the conversation we had, 2 points were made very clear, that when Venture Global broke ground, they understood that a rail would have to pass by their facility because they knew the port development plan was in place. Their only request to us was that as we go through this process, as Sam was describing, 30% and 60%, that we would actively work to engage them so that a safety analysis could be done in order to protect their assets and not disrupt what they're doing. That's what Sam is referring to, that we've identified what their current designs are from a joint permit application. We continue to work to engage that dialogue with respect to the amount of time that they don't have right now, considering where they are between FID, the amount of construction that's going on, and the contracts that they're negotiating. We very much respect their time is limited, but they were very positive in their response to us that they knew the rail needed to come through. And their only request was that we work with them to maintain a safety parameter that would not impair either project, and we commit to that.
Well, that's what I'm hoping that, and that they clearly understand that whatever phase in it, that won't have no negative impact
Yes, sir.
on the structure itself, even though it's coming after the fact, more or less, because they're steady building. So your railroad plan's not in that construction site right now.
Well, and as Sam alluded to, and we can share that maybe in the July meeting, right, because those are their permit drawings, that the crossing that they have was designed with some foresight to have enough grade elevation difference that a train could safely pass underneath it. So that part's there. And then therefore the understanding of any kind of interference that may be done. Now we need to communicate with them things about speed, weight of the car, things of that nature, right? That is part of the safety analysis. And then as Sam indicated, in any structure, LNG or otherwise, when you're that close proximity, there are prescribed safety features that must be installed in cooperation with that current owner because they were there first.
Right.
So we don't, there's no plan to interrupt their process by any means. They are well ahead of everything.
Well, I hope not.
Yes, sir.
I
Yes,
hope
sir.
not.
Message received.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Konovich.
Just to add to that, our project will not impact their project. Their project will have some impact on our design, but we're not far enough along yet, so we can adjust for that.
See, my concern was all about being consistent and being aware of what's going on in the environment. And those people have spent a whole lot of money, serious money, in planning to develop that. And I don't want anybody to come to this table and say, now we got a problem. I don't want to see that, and I hear that about that. That's my point. Okay, thank you very much.
So their contract they signed leasing all the property has that stated in there that they know the rail's coming.
I'm sorry, question or statement from Mr. Cook?
Is it in the contract they signed that they understand that the rail's going to pass through their property?
I don't know which contract.
I don't think he would know that, and I will check it, because
You said they knew that it was coming, so.
That was a statement from the Venture Global representative, Mr. Kognovich. That was a statement from him in one of our conversations.
But now they know it's coming, but when they signed the contract, did they have it in there?
Yes, they knew that a terminal was going to be built at the lower end of the property on parcel 6. They embraced that.
They
knew it.
before we made our announcement, sir.
And it said that we're going to use their property to run a rail across.
I'm not sure if he exactly said that, but I will see if there's any language in there that specifically talks about the rail. But they did know the rail's coming, and you can't run rail, down a river, and you can't run it. You know that. I'm just saying, but I will run that to ground to see if there's any language in there.
They signed a lease, leasing up the whole property. Now we're going to tell them, we're running a railroad across it.
They knew a railroad was coming.
Is it in the lease agreement?
I already told you I would have to check that out, and I will.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any further comments from the board? Hearing none. Next speaker.
Luke?
Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Luke Labaugh with Volkert. Pleased to be here this afternoon to give you an update on where we are with the terminal progress. Not a whole lot updated to provide today from the last one, except I do have a colleague here who's going to go through some of the modes of operation associated with the terminal, and that's really your big update on the terminal today. But I will step through a few slides. We'll go through progress, overall permit update, procurement of the progressive design build contractor, and then just a brief look ahead. So we're continuing to work with APM Terminals on the basis of design for the terminal operation. As I just mentioned, I have a colleague here today who's going to go through that in a little bit more detail, a lot more detail for you.
and I have some great pictures to show you of how the operation will work. Coastal use permit for geotechnical borings was received. We are working through that as the river has gone down below 11, so that's great news for the opportunity to go out and take borings. We did choose a progressive design build contractor, and negotiations are ongoing, so we're not quite there with a signed contract, but we are progressing with that. Also, we're continuing to coordinate with the beneficial cargo owner, who's here in the room today, on final site configuration, looking at bunkering options, and sustainability continues to be something that's in the forefront of understanding backup power options going forward based on the mode of operation. As I mentioned before, the coastal use permit is received. I know we've said that a few times, but it's very exciting because it's really a step forward so that we can go out and collect the data that's needed as soon as we get the contractor signed and moving forward. As of a couple days ago, the gauge reading at Carrollton was at 10.28. Hopefully it stays that or trends down. And then we're also moving the permit for the borings over to LA 23 so that Mr. Fetters can give it or assign it over to the EPC so they can go out and collect this data. As I mentioned, we're continuing negotiations with the contractor. We're getting very close. Hopefully, we'll resolve that this month. We did have the EPC participate in good faith at the May 25th project meeting in New Orleans. This was the day before the stakeholder meeting, so I want to acknowledge that and appreciate them coming to the table. And then the next steps is, looking at just exactly what data do we need to move forward from a design standpoint, whether that's geotechnical survey, other information, utility information, that type of thing. So that's kind of the next step. So hopefully we can move forward in earnest in July going forward. And then that involves fieldwork initiation, hopefully soon. If we're allowed to get everything signed up, then the first order of business is determining what data we do need to go out and do the design, both for the VCO site and for the terminal site. And then we'll put a plan together to go forward with that in July. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Next.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. Hardeep, would you come up and do the mode of operation, please? We have Mr. Max here who's going to talk a little bit first.
Yeah, just 1 second. Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Max Nasser. I'm a Senior Director with WSP USA. We've been engaged to work on the basis of design along with LA 23. WSP is an international corporation. We have about 60,000 employees, 15,000 in the United States, and we've had permanent offices here in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans for over 35 years. Just to give you a little bit about our presence. Hardeep is going to manage the presentation for us.
Thanks, Max. Good afternoon. My name is Hardeep Kajar, and I'll go over the terminal layout concepts today. So today, what we will do is go over the different container handling equipment that we are talking about in different layouts. What are the planning elements that's involved? The three concepts that involves three different mode of operation, as well as the equipment, the capital expense analysis, and then open the floor for questions. The very foremost container handling equipment that we use for container handling is the ship-to-shore crane to load and unload from containers on and off the vessel. So that's this shows a terminal in Panama. The universal tractor rig, UTR, and the bomb cart basically drive the containers from the wharf to the yard crane, and from yard crane to the wharf back. So you can see you have the bomb carts and the UTRs here in the picture. Okay. One One of the primary storage handling equipment is the electric rubber-tired gantry crane. You can see the pictures over here. It travels over the containers. Given that this is an electric crane, it uses a busbar system to get the power. And this shows a quick video. I can start. Oh, not in the luck with the video, but there it is, showing the operation on how the RTG is working and moving the containers on and off from the stack onto the UTR and bomb cart. Another equipment is the shuttle carrier that moves containers back and forth from the wharf crane and the storage crane. It's a smaller version of a straddle carrier that I'll show next. These are the semi-automated straddle carriers. You can see in the video how they operate in the yard, pick up the containers from the back reach of the ship-to-shore crane and move it into the storage yard. These can be automated in the yard and then have a remote handover to a human during the truck transfer operation, which you see down below on the below right image. The next equipment is a dual cantilever rail-mounted gantry crane, or a DCRMG. Again, it's used to store and retrieve containers in the storage yard. This is an electrically powered crane. This can be used to maneuver remotely, and then it has a higher density, as you can see, multiple storage blocks between the legs. This is just an overview of what a terminal with a DCRMG crane look like. The next is the planning elements that we accounted for. Things like vessel mix, what are the different sizes of vessel for both conventional containers as well as the beneficial cargo owners containers. The throughput mix, mixture of the empties, loaded containers, the BCO containers, transshipments, local containers, as well as refrigerated containers. How long they sit in, the dwell time, which varies between 3 days to 7 days in the terminal, and then the peaking factor, basically the seasonal variation within the overall operation throughout the year. We came up with 3 different concepts, where the first one is utilizing electrified RTGs in the storage yard and then UTRs to move containers back and forth from the wharf to the storage yard. The dual cantilever RMG or DCRMG is used in the next concept, concept number 2, along with shuttle carriers to move containers back and forth between the wharf. And then the semi-automated straddle carriers are used in the third concept, which moves the entire operation from wharf to the storage yard and then hand over to the trucks. So this first layout shows the concept number 1, which is the ERTG and a UTR layout. You have your wharf over here with a 100-foot gauge gantry crane, or STS crane, that moves container on and off of vessels. The UTRs will take the containers from here and move it into the stacks, these green stacks over here, which are the RTG stacks. And then if there are empty containers, they will be moved over here in keynote number 8. The outside trucks will come in through the gate to pick up the containers from here or drop off the containers into the RTG stack and go out. And then you have the ancillary infrastructure, such as the administration building, maintenance and repair, as well as the equipment parking. You have your BCO containers stored here along with the filling station so that they can maneuver in this area itself and next to the facility. Layout number 2, the DCRMG with shuttle carriers. Again, similar footprint. You have the dual cantilever mounted gantry crane in this purple, number 7 keynote. And the shuttle carriers will move the containers back and forth between the wharf as well as the DCRMG block. For the outside trucks does not go in the yard itself. They come here in near keynote number 9, where there is an interface between the shuttles and the trucks. Shuttles will pick up the container and drop it off, or pick it up from the trucks and drop it off back in the yard. Concept number 3 is the semi-automated layout with straddle carriers, where the straddle carriers will pick up the containers at the back reach of the crane and move it into the storage yard over here and here. And these are semi-automated, so that move will be done automatically. Number 9 is where the human interface will take place, where you have the outside trucks coming in, waiting there to drop off or pick up a container, where the shuttle carriers will bring in and hand it over. So these are the 3 layouts that we analyzed. We also analyzed the capacity that these 3 layout gives. So basically, you have all these 3 layouts are somewhat similar in capacity. So layout A1 is the ERTG layout, A2 is the DCRMG layout, and then concept 3 is, or A3 is the semi-automated layout, semi-automated straddle carrier. They have similar berth capacity, but the limiting factor is the yard capacity, which ranges between about 633,000 to 498,000 containers per year. So here's a quick summary table that shows the capacity of the terminal in lifts per year or containers per year, and then the equipment requirement for different type of equipment. We also looked into various Capex elements that will be involved in development of this terminal. Ranges from site area preparation, the infrastructure, such as wharf, bridges, pavement, utilities, including light poles, fire hydrant, different conduits for data, stormwater drainage, substation, shore power equipment, container handling equipment itself, buildings for administration, M&R, operations, and then technology such as the terminal operating system in order to handle all the informations, servers, and then remote desk where remote control operations are needed. We analyze, this is just an example of how we do the analysis with different elements involved. And then we also looked into the Capex assumptions. Given that we are looking at a conceptual level Capex, we have assumed certain contingency levels, civil infrastructure and the IT infrastructure at 30%, and equipment between 3 to 10%. We looked at different patterns of how these construction will take place, the time period and all that stuff, in order to develop a cash flow burn pattern. And then we also accounted for hardcore cost and soft cost, basically contingency, design, construction management, and overhead. All these were dropped into our summary analysis sheet that we do. This is just to give you an example of all the elements that get involved, the quantities, the units, different patterns, contingency, hard cost, soft cost, everything together. We did this for all the 3 layouts, and in the Capex summary, we divided the capital costs into coastal, different site preparation, site development, utilities, buildings, equipment, and information system. And these are the cost that comes up for 3 different concepts. These are the preliminary cost that we have analyzed so far. And that's for my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Councilmember Blink?
Sure. How many different, for each of these concepts, how many jobs could you expect?
We have not analyzed that in this concept level analysis yet.
It looks like there's a tremendous amount of automation, which would lend itself to not many people working.
It is not a fully automated terminal. The 3rd concept is the only one concept that has some automation involved. And it has human takeover for all the interfaces between the trucks as well as the yard.
What is the proposed elevation for the yard?
I'll let Chris or Luke answer that question.
Yes, sir. Currently, it's proposed at a plus 16 elevation, as described and discussed with the Corps of Engineers, in order to be able to have the least amount, if no interference, on the federal project, which is the levee. And as you could see in the drawings that Hardik provided, the design here is in order to be able to minimize those potential crossings with regard to the levee. That's why it's a causeway and key design rather than just a straight terminal into the river. But it is a plus 16 design as of right now.
Councilmember Newberry?
Yeah, how long does it take from beginning to end to construct a terminal like this? Year, 2 years?
So The part of where we are right now with WSP's engagement is to provide these modes of operation. The contract that Mr. LeBas was talking about with the EPC contractor drives to get us what's called a guaranteed max price and a 60% design by the end of the year. We've got an aggressive schedule that a terminal of this size can be built somewhere in the 12 to 18 month range with some, you're going to continue to expand, but we can start with a core operation within that window.
Complete, Councilman Newberry? Councilman Blink?
Sure. Can we have an update on how many jobs that the terminal would bring at the next meeting? I mean, it seems all pretty straightforward here if we could just do the math.
Yeah, so probably best person to answer that would be the terminal operator, Mr. Blink, and I will do my best to get him here or get a response for you, okay? But that's more of a terminal operator's role to determine that. Same thing with the degree of automation. In this world, there is some very constrictive contracts with the ILA in this region that determine the level of automation and the work rules. And we have been asked, as you would in any terminal, port would be the same way, that those are restricted to the signatories, which would be AP Moeller terminals. But we'll do our best to get them here.
Certainly. The justification for constructing this and dealing with the traffic flows, the train traffic blocking Woodland Highway, and all of the other problems that come along with having high volumes of cargo moving through the center of a suburban town are always justified with jobs. And we would really like to know how many jobs this thing is going to have. Awful lot of effort went into designing this thing, and it seems like the number of vehicles is there. It seems like I'm almost a little surprised y'all don't have that information here today.
We have estimates, but in our discussions with the terminal operator, that's one of those areas that we've been asked to stay away from without their consent or their buy-in to it. So I'll ask a representative from APMT to join us and provide that directly as an example with their operations in Mobile and otherwise. Generally speaking, you're at a terminal this size, you're in the hundreds of jobs, but I won't, beyond that, I think I would be stretching a little bit, Mr. Blank.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any further comments from the board? Let me ask this question. We've seen presentations similar to this for quite a while now. How does this compare to Nigel Nixon's presentations that we have seen presented?
The base information, Mr. Russell, is the same as far as the projected new master plan from Mr. Nixon and its total growth layout. This that WSP has been asked to analyze is what Nigel often referred to as phase one. And it has since probably been separated down again into like a phase 1A and 1B, depending upon some scheduling issues. But this does in line with what we call phase one in Mr. Nixon's presentation.
So is Nigel Nixon still involved in this project?
Yes, sir, very much so.
What role is he playing compared to WSP?
So he is in the planning and advisory role to the overall project. And then WSP is looking specifically at the mode of operation as a response to a request by AP Moeller to analyze 3 different variables for their selection as the terminal operator.
And they all work for LA 23?
Nigel Nixon and WSP do, yes, sir.
And they have the same contract that they're not able to disclose the expenditures that you make to them?
It's, again, Mr. Russell, it's a private contract on private funding, yes, sir.
So all this private funding that we are going to reimburse through the rail usage fee, we can't see what's going on. And this is for the record that I'm stating this because I stated at every meeting that it's important to me to know where the money is going.
Terminal operations and rail operations, when it comes to costs, the terminal is separate and it generates boxes. The boxes then go across the rail line. The rail line generates revenue. So those projects are separate and distinct in what their cash flows are, the parties that are involved, and the way the revenues would be utilized in any form or fashion, whether it be payments and or the private finance structure that is with the terminal.
I'm looking at the intellectual properties that we are supposed to be owning at the end of the day, and why we are not allowed to see the expenditures that are being spent to develop the intellectual properties that if we decide to buy them, take them away or whatever, and it's important to me to know where the money is going.
Understood, sir. We've had this discussion a number of times, and that is around the rail, sir.
And we're going to keep having the discussion until some transparency comes to the table.
Understood.
So thank you.
Understood.
Any further comments? That completes your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Pedro?
3A, financial report, budget tax. Oh, we have one more? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Pedro Santos, and I'm the founder of Andalusian. We are a natural gas and commercial container transport company that would like to set itself up in container operations in the vicinity of Plaquemine Parish and within the parish. I have some slides here to explain a little bit about who we are, what do we do as a business, and I think I've heard a lot of questions about jobs. We certainly have calculated exactly at least what pertains to our facility, and we will speculate, as we are not restricted by terminal operator. We can speculate on the kind of impact, but we do see this as a transformational project, not only for the community, but also for the nation. So it's a pleasure for me to address some of the elements, at least the way that we see it, from the perspective of a cargo originator. So we're very focused on projects that are in the nearby region. And when we say nearby region, about 2,500 nautical miles, which puts us in the northern coast of South America. Our focus is really in a lot of places that have deficient infrastructure. And when I say deficient infrastructure from a natural gas access, so we take that for granted in the United States, where there's an incredible amount of natural gas pipeline access. There's electricity 24/7, for the most part, almost 365 days a year, barring natural disasters. A lot of these destinations we're going to do not have the critical scale. So in a lot of cases, some of these countries have less electrical demand than a 2 or 3 parishes combined in Louisiana, as an example. So they struggle to build infrastructure, and part of what they need is access to energy, but also access to industrialize. We are focused on Central America first, so our first market is Honduras. For those of you that may know some information about the country, they are very focused on the textile trade, and that's really where we are focused as well. So right now, when you consider what a piece of clothing, a piece of apparel has to do in order to get to your retail store, a lot of times that cotton, the highest quality cotton in the world, is actually grown in the U.S. And that cotton is then shipped overseas. It may go as far as, for example, India. And then there gets processed into apparel and then can come back to the retail store. So that amount of distance is an enormous amount of emissions and expenditure, and something that the recent years have revealed to the industry is the importance of being a little bit closer to home. So in this case, what we call our systems, because our ships are going to be dedicated, doing a port-to-port transfer on a weekly round trip, in this case to northern Central America, 2 ships on a weekly basis, and we call it a virtual conveyor, because you basically drop your cargo on one end and it'll be taken to the other destination, and in the process save a lot of time, money, and emissions, amongst other particular benefits. We've spent some time analyzing the different ports, the logistics and trade routes in the region. We've worked with some of the largest firms from a consulting perspective, many names that you will easily recognize, some names that are not as familiar, but they're highly specialized. As an example, Drury is a specialist in the container trade business. And then also we've hired energy and an executive consulting specialist to try to give us a little bit of perspective and validate that some of the assumptions that we were looking at when we observed this region were valid. So one of the things that we started to analyze are what are the number of containers that are currently trading in the region. And there's approximately a bit more than 500,000 containers that are actively going back and forth from the C4 countries with the Gulf of Mexico and staying within the nearby region. There's a total addressable market or capacity in the region that's well over 1 million containers. And that does not include today any energy containers, which I will discuss very briefly. So one of the things that is extremely important, and as we think about emissions, then thinking about the river access and thinking about rail, these are the two elements that really complete the picture, because although some populations live somewhat close to the deep water ports, most of the population that would be addressed by a project that is handling cargo is really deep in the center of the country. And the advantage of the location in the mouth of the Mississippi River is being able to access about a third of the U.S. population in less time and cost and resources than any other ports in the region. So having the connectivity to the railroads is very critical and something that we observed and desired from day one. But part of what we wanted to do is understand the cost, time implications depending on the different regions. And we did this particular study where we mapped out all of the potentially competitive ports to make sure that the locations that we were discussing here were indeed effective from both a time and cost perspective. So although our business is energy containers in one part, the biggest number of units that we move is actually commercial containers, only that we're one part of the supply chain of the commercial containers. We would be the maritime part, and then a shipping company would complete the rest of the delivery inland into the United States. But the big, and sometimes we think about the container business only from the actual jobs it has as an impact of the container business itself or the port. We can't speculate on how big of a business this will affect, but the reality is that the pandemic has taught us that supply chains are right now very vulnerable. And to a good extent, being in such an interconnected world, there are some industries that we would struggle if they were to suffer disruptions. And we saw that with semiconductors. We're a big part of the automotive industry in the U.S., which is an incredible and important part of our economy, is affected because there was a lot of concentration on that supply chain overseas. Now, textiles may not be exactly the same way, or apparel, but it is an enormous opportunity because most of it is actually made in Asia. And if you think about some of the problems that are affecting is a very large amount of illegal immigration, much of it from Central America. And this is one of the businesses that is ultimately has an opportunity, because instead of sending these jobs and opportunities to Asia, as they are right now, there's an opportunity to actually keep them in the nearby region and therefore concentrate a lot of the economic effects, reduce the illegal immigration, and at the same time deliver trade and jobs, American jobs and American energy delivered into the region. And we believe that we are, or we can play an important conduit in our customers in that role as well. But this is ultimately what matters. What are we doing from a jobs perspective? The CNG operations themselves, we're going to start with 30 full-time employees. And the facility will operate 24/7, and we'll have anywhere from 8 to 12 operating staff. We will have additional personnel that will be involved, but we want to be conservative in our numbers. The indirect impact, and that is something that over time will grow. When you have a port that has excellent connectivity and excellent opportunities, then you get a lot of the attraction of the supply chain for other industries. So if you think about the supply chain for the apparel and textile industry, much of it is located in the Mid-Atlantic. And it's very far away from a lot of the markets where actually all of that is consumed, because only a limited amount of population may live in the nearby area to North Carolina. Well, those distribution centers, seeing a successful and stable container port project, would have the ability over time to relocate here. Direct to the port jobs, in order to just handle our cargo on day one, the terminal operator will need at least 3 times the number of personnel that work inside of our facility. So I can say that very safely state that at least 90 people would be employed in the container terminal just to help assist in the service of our cargo with only our 2 initial ships. And there is a rule of thumb in the industry that each job generated at the port generates 6 jobs in the greater community. So that is an accepted statistic that you can look, and there's going to be slightly more, slightly less depending on the location. But it is something that draws a lot because, well, you want to operate and you want to run the terminal and you want to run it with folks that are living in the immediate community. And part of the question that I was addressed to before by one of the members of the commission was, what are we doing from a training perspective? Well, we're not only thinking about training, but also about transportation, right? So make it very easy for anybody that lives in the East Bank to also be able to work actively in the facility. And I had a chance myself in my prior visit to ride on the ferry system. So that was extremely reliable. I was able to make it to the airport. I was in the East Bank looking at some properties, and it was a great experience. But we do plan to address that as part of the human resource program, because that's one of the things we want to evaluate. And some of the unfortunate cases that have happened recently with the announcement, for example, in Alliance, but for us, those are people that are already trained in energy and in oil and gas safety procedures. So they're going to have an opportunity to preferentially be looking at jobs and opportunities with us. As I mentioned before, the U.S.-wide impact should not be dismissed. I mean, the opportunity that a lot of the cotton industry that right now is actually disadvantaged because of how far away they have to ship their product. Shipping to a nearby region means that more of that margin or profit actually stays in the U.S. And then if you think about the nearshoring, it's not that we're taking any labor input from the U.S. It's actually that the labor input that would be done by Asian countries can now be done in Central America. And those are folks that are not going to have, or at least will not have, an economic excuse to try to seek movement north of their own borders. So from an environmental perspective, there are a couple of things, and I showed the amount of distance, but for the container trade itself, we're talking about 40 to 90% reduction in emissions, which is an enormous amount from an environmental perspective. And if you think about the impact that gas-fueled trains, keeping in mind that practically from a flow of gas perspective, most of our gas will come out of the Haynesville, which is located mostly in the state of Louisiana. We're also going to be able to lower the emissions by the trucks and the trains that would be carrying a lot of this cargo. And also, we'd be displacing the heavy fuel oil and the coal that would otherwise be consumed by these countries. So from a CO2 impact perspective, this has a substantial impact, and it's all because of the opportunity of being located where we are. From an investment perspective, here are exact numbers. So we're going to start our service with 2 ships. We hope with the number of projects, the region that we're addressing, to have within a 5-year time frame 12 ships operating regularly and calling on these facilities, at the target of 1 to 2 ships per day that would have these commercial containers. Now, our ships are fairly small as compared to some of the transatlantic or trans-Pacific ships, but nonetheless, they have a lot of frequency. And in terms of our economic throughput, we are starting, or we work with long-term contracts. That's how everything is set up. It's not the typical relationship, because BCOs at times tend to be quite fickle, in the sense that you may have a retailer that ships today through one port, and tomorrow they get a $5 discount, they go to the next port. Well, in our case, it's very different. Our customers build 10, 15-year power plants and manufacturing facilities that are very capital intensive, counting on us to be there on a regular basis. So the type of agreement that we sign on to is a capacity agreement, meaning that whether we use the terminal capacity or not, we're going to be subscribed to that demand. And that's something that's synergistic when you think about a piece of infrastructure, because many of the projects that are port projects that are done, they're speculative in the sense that there's some bet of future demand. And here we'd like to think about it a little bit different. We'd like to assist with having some built-in demand, and we want the port to be very successful and growing, because it does help in reducing the unit cost and increasing the overall impact. So we've done a lot of work in order to validate some of the elements, and as I offered to commission members, we are very open in terms of any questions we can address for you all, and tell you more about what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Santos, for your presentation, and I enjoyed the concept that you are putting forward, and I realize that you are one small piece of the overall port development project, but a very important one, and I'm hoping that you have much success, and regardless of what you heard in here this morning, I have confidence in you, and I expressed that to you in a private meeting this morning. So I want to thank you.
We appreciate the vote of confidence, Chairman, and we will not let you down. We're very excited about this for the greater impact, and we really like the project and how it's developed and the support that the leadership overall has provided. And I think it'll be great for the community. So we look forward to further progress. Thank you.
Any comments from the audience?
Rob Fauché. So I'm not sure how we came to this point in this parish where we're the I guess the test tube for a port, but it seems like we have, because LA 23, how many ports have they built? 0. How many train tracks have they built? 0. WSP. Just pulled up their website, went down their list, looked at their story. They've never done a container terminal. Never done a container terminal. Done all kind of transportation stuff. Then I start reading a little deeper, and I think it was stated that there's 60,000 employees. Their website notes that there's let me find it real quick. There's 30-something thousand total in the company, and only I think there's like 15,000 in the States, maybe a little more. But do some research, folks. I don't know how we're coming to be in the trial of bringing these companies in and not vetting them. But obviously, I don't think that the port director nor the port administration is doing the job that they should be doing to vet these companies that are coming in and making sure that they are experienced in what we're getting them to do or asking them to do. Trial and error, I guess, is a good thing, but and everybody's got to do something once. But it seems to me that this is a little more money than what we want to put in one basket, and it looks like we have all of our money in one basket, and that's LA 23, and he's actually running the port, and he's choosing all of these people. I'm not real sure why or how, but these people are not experienced from what I'm reading. Now, did they do another one last week? I don't know, or since they posted all this stuff on their website. But there's none of that is on their website.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilmember Black.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out a couple things. Going on my 8th year in this role, and I just want to reiterate to you, Sandy and Chris, and to the folks from WSP and Illusion, at least I have full confidence in your abilities to get us off of X that we've been sitting on for 30 plus years, which is absolutely doing nothing besides collecting tariffs. We have a phenomenal opportunity that we worked on for many, many years. I know I mentioned this at the last council meeting, and I think we're very close to coming to fruition with it. I've asked Sandy and his administration, since I was on this commission, to accomplish a couple things. And one of them was to secure a terminal operator and a terminal investor. And we're there. We're very, very close. I've been involved in many, many meetings. I think this is going to bring an absolute phenomenal opportunity to Plaquemines Parish, not only for jobs, but also for new infrastructure to include levee protection and things like that. And I love the quote you gave about transformational, because this is absolutely transformational. And I do agree that the 6-to-1 ratio is key. And that is something that is going to be able to And those jobs, those 6-to-1 jobs, those are restaurants and, hotels and other facilities like that. So it's just really going to transform Blackman's Parish. I just want to end by saying one thing, and I appreciate Councilmember Newberry last year, back in March, for drafting this resolution, which I'll just read the preamble. But this resolution passed unanimously, and it was around a year ago, March, so maybe a year and a few months. But it passed unanimously, and the work that's been accomplished by the Port Administration is remarkable. How much has been done since then to get us to this point. The preamble is pretty simple: a resolution affirming support for continued efforts towards construction of a container terminal within the jurisdiction of the Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. It passed unanimously. So hopefully that hasn't changed, especially since we've come so close to making this happen and come to fruition. And you have my full support and my full confidence. So thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Chris, and to your team.
Any further comments? Hearing none, you completed your executive report. Next item, please.
3A, financial report and budget to actual. Bids and
There's none?
advertisements. There are none.
No financial report and budget to actual. Thank you.
Bids and advertisements. There are none. Introduction of ordinances and resolutions.
We have any?
I have a few, yes. Okay, there are two. An ordinance to amend and as amended, readopt ordinance 21-108, authorizing Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, to purchase land owned by Elliott P. and Carol P. Raleigh and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. The second one, an ordinance of the Plaquemines Parish Council acting on the sole governing authority of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District to provide for the training and certification requirements for deckhands and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
Is that it?
And that is all.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Ordinances and resolutions on second reading and final passage. 6B, a resolution acknowledging climate change. Sir?
That has been withdrawn.
Withdrawn? Thank you. Item C, a resolution approving and authorizing Benedict Roussel, Port Chairman, Minor J. Sanders, Port Executive Director, Chimbrell Raleigh Williams, Port Director of Finance, to execute a Louisiana compliance questionnaire to Camnetter and Company, CPAs, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Commissioner Newberry.
Yes. Right now, I'm going to open this up for discussion because the reason why I introduced this because I was under the impression that our port. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll ask for a second. Sorry.
Second.
Thank you. So I was under the impression that Mr. Chairman had some issues, and I did introduce it because I was under the impression that this is a simple questionnaire. It's routine through the state legislative auditor that a questionnaire is to be completed and a resolution needs to be done and needs to be adopted. From what I understand, I don't see, according to what you sent the board, Chimbrell, where signatures haven't been signed on this questionnaire. So I'd like to know from the chair in this open meeting what it was his hold off on this questionnaire.
What the questionnaire does, it certifies that everything that is checked off on the boxes are accurate. There are boxes in the questionnaire that are checked off that I do not believe are accurate, and we are waiting on Attorney General's opinion to verify whether that is accurate, And so before the Attorney General issues the opinion to tell us whether we are on sound footing, I could not support signing the questionnaire that I'm attesting to it that it is. And in a meeting on Monday, I raised the issues of the auditor contacting us to have a conference prior to the audit, and I thought that's where we were headed, but if not, that's why I can't support the questionnaire as it's presented.
So, Shimbrel, I did reach out to the auditor, and I did not receive a call back. And from what I understand from the chairman, he hasn't either. Do you recall if she's on vacation or what her position of this?
No, I'm not. I'm not. I don't know if she's on vacation or anything. I do know that it is audit season, and their audits are due June 30th, so she may be working with other clients. I would like to make note that in the resolution, in the whereas, it states that the Port Administration has assured the Parish Council as the governing authority of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District that the Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire has been completed in accordance with law and that all answers are true and correct to the best of its belief and knowledge. And that is how we answered the question, to the best of our belief and knowledge. I know in an accounting world we can't give 100% certainty. That's why you are audited, to give that opinion whether or not things are fairly stated and stated correctly. I also would like to state that in the Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire, it states that this questionnaire is a required part of a financial audit of the Louisiana state and local government agencies. This questionnaire will be provided to the auditors, and they do use this questionnaire as a tool in their field work when auditing a state agency.
I know it's general housekeeping and something we do every year. Is that correct? And I know we do it also on the government side. I know it's just a simple questionnaire. I was hoping that if Mr. Russo had an issue with a question, I'm sure he had an obligation to answer yes or no. And if it was no, he would put his comment. But I will defer this for one more council meeting, and hoping that Ms. Jamie returns my call, I will reach out to her again, and then we'll move with it next meeting.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Under new business, 7A, introduction of resolutions wherein suspension is being sought. There are none. Item 8, approval of the May 26, 2022 regular meeting minutes.
I offer.
Next for a second. Second by Councilmember Gouy. Any comments or discussion on the adoption of the May 26, 2022 regular meeting minutes? Hearing none, machine is open. And the minutes are adopted 8-1. Let the record reflect that Councilmember Black has left the chamber. And we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Offer.
Offered by Councilmember Bartholomew, second by Councilmember Arbrough. And the machine is open. Let the record reflect that the meeting is adjourned today at 4:23.